Next up, we have James Arlen with Security When Nanoseconds Count.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, you're all in the carbohydrate coma. That's awesome. I love the after lunch slot for exactly that reason. So, welcome to Security When Nanoseconds Count. The most important thing I need to do is put up the giant disclaimer. I am employed, I would like to stay employed. This is just me. None of my employers have really any idea what I'm here talking about. And let's just keep this between us. We've been asked to make sure that you turn in your completed feedback form. Apparently that makes it more likely they'll have me back to yammer. So I've been in information security for, I use 15 plus years, but really it's getting time to switch that digit over. So I've been around. I've had every job from firewall admin and log reviewer all the way up to CISO to publicly traded financial. I've done staff operations kind of work. I've done a lot of consulting, standing on street corners, really. Utilities vertical, so I can talk to you about all that real-time stuff that I talked to you about last year. And the financials vertical, where I'm going to talk to you about some stuff that is so real-time, it's almost in the future. And I'm not an expert at anything, I swear to you. So in researching, actually it was noted by somebody on Twitter, reminded me that there's this really incredible clip by somebody who we really should pay a little more attention to. I often rant about studying the past. And studying the past in nanoseconds, sort of a really great mathematician who put together some of the first compilers, some of the first programming languages, rather famous lady. And she's got the best description of a nanosecond. This is about 2 minutes long, and just stay with me, it's important.
They started talking about circuits that acted in nanoseconds, billionths of a second. Oh, I didn't know what a billion was. I don't think most of those men downtown know what a billion is either. And if you don't know what a billion is, how on earth do you know what a billionth is? I fussed and fumed. Finally, one morning, in total desperation, I called over to the engineering building, and I said, please cut off a nanosecond and send it over to me. And I've brought you some today. Now, what I wanted when I asked for a nanosecond was, I wanted a piece of wire which would represent the maximum distance that electricity could travel in a billionth of a second. Now, of course, it wouldn't really be through wire. It'd be out in space, the velocity of light. So if you start with the velocity of light and use your friendly computer, you'll discover that a nanosecond is 11.8 inches long. The maximum limiting distance that electricity can travel in a billionth of a second. Finally, at the end of about a week, I called back and said, I need something to compare this to. Could I please have a microsecond? I've only got 1 microsecond, so I can't give you each one. Here's a microsecond. 984 feet. I sometimes think we ought to hang one over every programmer's desk or around their neck so they know what they're throwing away when they throw away microseconds. Now, I hope you'll all get your nanoseconds. They're absolutely marvelous for explaining to wives and husbands and children and admirals and generals and people like that. An admiral wanted to know why it took so damn long to send a message via satellite. And I had to point out that between here and the satellite, there were a very large number of nanoseconds. You can explain these things. It's really very helpful, so be sure to get your nanoseconds.
So we owe a lot to Admiral Hopper. We really do. Like I said, I've been a proponent of focusing on lessons learned in the past. And what Admiral Hopper is talking about is nanoseconds as they exist inside of a machine and as they exist in wasted, crappy, loose, sloppy code. And she comes from a time when you couldn't have loose, sloppy, wasted code, when you couldn't do things in a way that's time efficient for the humans, but very inefficient for the computers. So there's some really important stuff in there. And I had planned to bring you all nanoseconds, but the Transportation Security Administration is not fond of bundles of wire in luggage. So the speed of light matters. Possibly for the first time, we've got money and the speed of light are important together. This is humanity facing the speed of light as a limiting factor. The distance light travels in a millisecond. It's a thousandth of a second, is around 300 kilometers. It's 186 miles for the rest of you. Microsecond, which is a millionth of a second, you get around 300 meters, 328 yards, 984 feet. Nanosecond, 30 centimeters, 1 foot, 11.8 inches. That's not very far when you think about it, and realize that that's the vacuum speed of light, not the speed of light in a fiber or the speed of an electron in a conductor. Those are much shorter distances. Or sorry, slightly longer distances because the speed is slower. These distances are microscale, really. These are inside the data center kind of distances, really. Excuse me, for microseconds and nanoseconds. And these times, just to give you something sort of really visceral to hook onto, you think of things as being fast, and you know, we say, well, it's in a blink of an eye. Right? Well, blink of an eye is about 350 to 400 microseconds. And the world that we're going to talk about today is faster than that by an order of magnitude at least, and getting faster. So before you ask, we're talking about money, filthy, grubby, lovely money that we would all like a little more of. I'm not going to mention any of these things. You should find them on your buzzword bingo card. And that's the only place they should ever show up, not in a talk. Finance at Black Hat. Well, Black Hat doesn't really talk about money very often. Doesn't talk about finance very often. Black Hat is all about offense. There's a little bit of defense, sort of smattered in here and there. But this is one of those cases where nobody really talks about this particular class of vulnerabilities because no one really knows they're there. And I have an annoying habit of coming to Black Hat and telling you about interesting things. A couple of years ago, I told you that there will come a day when the Department of Justice will tell you your encryption password or jail. Yeah, I was right. Last year, I told you that SCADA was scary. This year, what, half the talks, roughly? So pay attention to this stuff because it's not important necessarily today, although if you're in the financial sector, you're going to leave here with your knees shaking a little bit. It's going to become really important in the future because technologies have a nasty tendency to spread, right? Once a technology exists in one vertical, pretty soon all the verticals are doing it. And to quote Cory Doctorow, computers are not getting slower, bigger, and more expensive every year. Speed is going to become a real issue for everyone. So how much do we know about money in the room? How much do we know about trading? Do we have any traders in the audience? No. Anybody who works in a bank? Capital markets company? Oh, it's a couple of you. Sorry, guys. Girls, too. In about the 1200s, we started having trading of the way that we think about it today, with a central market and some level of anonymity between buyers and sellers. By the 1500s, we had intermarket trading, so where you would be trading on multiple markets simultaneously and moving data back and forth, usually foot or horse. By the 1600s, with the Dutch East India Company, we had the first equity trading, where anybody could be a member of the empowered class. This one's really funny. Everybody knows RFC 1149, IP over avian carrier. Reuters did that for real, between Aachen and Belgium, to move market data. So, you know, those stock ticker things that came later on, they used to wrap those around the legs of birds and send them from city to city. Reuters is a little different these days, isn't it? By the late 1800s, we started having stuff that was electronic-ish. You know, it's telegraphy, it's Daddy Warbucks from Annie kind of stuff. Mid-1900s, we started having quotation systems. So this is the next price, not the last price. Tickers are always the last price. The next price is the one that actually matters. That's how much money you're going to have to pay for the next trade. And they sort of become widespread, you know, and these are big, honkin', ugly, nearly analog devices. You know, they make selector typewriters look small in a lot of cases. By the late 1900s, we're using computers. You know, NASDAQ was introduced. So we're doing electronic trading. We're doing records maintenance on the computers. We're not doing record maintenance on paper or on chalkboards anymore. And by the early 2000s, computers are trading with each other. And largely, there's no humans involved. So high-speed trading is committing trades on a scale faster than human interaction. So humans cannot do high-speed trading because we're not fast enough. Remember, some of the fastest things about humans are blinking our eyes at 350 to 400 microseconds. Computers are trading in 450 or less, 300 or less. The goal is to get down below 3 digits. 2 digits is good, 50, 45, 35. Algorithmic trading is essentially, it's the brains of how you make those trades. It's one thing to just execute a dumb trade. I'd like to buy 1 billion shares of Google for $1, please give me. It's something else entirely to be adding some sort of machine intelligence to the trade. So, I mean, the machine intelligence in this case is just big math, big, scary math that I can't do. And it's based on the results of incoming information. External sources, this is almost unbelievable, but external sources can include things like press wire feeds, you know, the kind of thing that people like Evans think are awesome. Arbitrage. Everybody knows what arbitrage is? Yes, nodding. Half of you have gone to sleep after lunch. It's so cute that we all need our naps, just like we're in kindergarten. It's when you're taking advantage of a price difference between two different markets. And traditionally, that's been two different markets in space, right? You go somewhere and you buy something at the wholesale price, and then you go somewhere else and you sell it at the retail price, right? I mean, this is commerce, unless you're a farmer, in which case you buy retail and sell wholesale. Now we're talking about doing arbitrage in time. So we're just stretching out that time distance and allowing events to happen in a space where humans couldn't normally have events happening because we can't run that fast. When markets were new, trade times were human. You know, it took a couple of hours sometimes to execute a trade. By the late 1800s, we're down to minutes, right? Like, let's get moving. By the 1900s, we're down into seconds, right? Because we've got, you know, the advent of things like, everybody's seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, right? Hand signals and moving, yeah, there we go. Somebody who thinks they're Cameron. By the 2000s, we're down into the hundreds of microseconds. And hundreds of microseconds are often deemed as being a little bit too slow. You know, that goal is 2-digit microseconds and lower, to the point where we're starting to talk in nanoseconds. So thousands of nanoseconds, 1,000 nanoseconds is a microsecond. We're getting to that point where you don't say 1.4 microseconds, you say 1,400 nanoseconds. And future trade times, we're going to run up smack hard against the speed of light pretty soon now, actually. You know, as these things go, pretty soon, inside of probably 15 years, speed of light's going to become a real problem. And we're going to start doing things that look like algorithmic but are often future predictive, which is going to be kind of awesome. So, some basic architecture stuff. This is a very simplified diagram. I did this on purpose because one of the particular fetishes in IT and also finance is how complicated can you make your slides. So if you go to, we'll pick on Cisco today for at least part of the talk. If you go to Cisco's site and look at their ultra low latency, high speed trading white papers, they will give you this poster you can print out that printed out at a reasonable resolution is about yay by yay. And it has roughly 1 million Visio objects on it, and it's very, very pretty, but it's completely not understandable by normal people. So here's the real simple version. You have a market down here in your, yep, that's left. Down here in the left corner, you've got a market. New York Stock Exchange, Toronto Stock Exchange, London Stock Exchange, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, anything that has exchange in it, anything that you watched on the news when you were a kid and dad watched the news every day. Connected to that, and often very tightly connected, so no intermediary, direct connection, you have a trading engine. So these are called algo engines, they're called trade execution systems, they're called a bunch of different things, but essentially this is the computer that is doing those high-speed actions. Okay, this is the machine. You've got a human being sitting out on your right-hand side here who's telling that trade computer, generally speaking, from a 50,000-foot view level, here's what I want you to do today, sort of steering the course. And informing, in a lot of cases, the math behind those trades, you've got market data, which comes from market data suppliers, Reuters, MarketWatch, others. And these things are all connected in a fairly tight way. Now, remember that we're talking about fast, and this is going to be a recurring theme for the next 45 minutes or so. If you're trading in seconds, you have no position. Don't even bother. Just do not show up to the market. If you're trading in milliseconds, you're losing nearly every time. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. Think about the last time you ran ping or trace route, and you were okay with tens of milliseconds site to site. I actually checked this just before I left, going from gigabit interface on my laptop through a gigabit switch to a gigabit interface on my server at home was half a millisecond. So 500 microseconds, and that's, you know, consumer grade gear in my house. If you're trading at that sort of speed, you've lost the trade every time. I mean, this is, you've been fragged. Sub-millisecond, big players are beating you because they're faster. They're just plain faster. Hundreds of microseconds, you're a bit player, you're missing a lot. You're probably at about the 50-50 kind of range, which is actually not a winning position. Coin toss is not a good way to run a business. And in the tens of microseconds, you're usually winning, you know, 90-10 kind of thing. Almost as important as this sheer fastness aspect of it is the predictability of it. You need the next transaction to have the same runtime as the last transaction, right? And you can see why this is important. You know, we talk about jitter and how important it is for voice over IP kind of applications. Human beings can handle quite a lot of jitter. In these kinds of situations, if you're accustomed to an order speed of, let's be really generous and call it 45 microseconds, and the next trade is 52 microseconds, you're 7 microseconds late now, right? How much money is trapped in that 7 microseconds? It turns out it's probably a lot. So you've got real enemies in jitter, packet loss, and, you know, terrifyingly inefficient protocols like TCP. The jokes are just going to keep coming, so I love the cricket dead silence. Remember, a dropped packet is dropped cash. You know, we used to joke about how, you know, when you've got a bad routing situation and the packets are just falling out of the front of the router and hitting the floor, think $20 bills falling out of the front of your router and hitting the floor. Proximity takes away a lot of these problems, right? Running things over wide area networks, especially ones where you don't have path control. So you could get groomed onto the fiber that goes around the block a few times, or you could accidentally end up not on the transatlantic cable, but rather on a transatlantic satellite shot. When you start pulling things together, you get out of the WAN space. You even get out of the metropolitan area network space, you know, that dark fiber that creeps from one building to the next. When you get out of that space and down into the LAN kind of territory, you know, 300 meters and under, you start having more control over those things. So proximity counts. Ethernet kind of distances are the kind of distances you need to be thinking in. You know, 300 meters or less, 1,000 feet or less. Latency has costs associated with it. I mean, direct measurable costs. And in the quest to reduce latency, it's very easy to get budget, right? When you can say, well, 10 microseconds of latency costs us $100,000 a day. And eliminating 5 of those microseconds worth of delay will cost us $38,000 a year. Can we have $38,000? Well, your business case just made itself in one day. Of course you're going to have that money. So pay attention to where the latency cost value is and start to understand. This is more of that know your business crap that I talk about a lot. Start to understand where that latency fits and how you can fit against it. Nobody flipped out and pointed out that there's some things missing here, right? Hyper-simplified architectural diagram, remember? I didn't disinclude anything. Please tell me somebody's noticed that there's something missing. Oh, come on, you're in security. Where's the flippin' firewall, peeps? I don't see it. I didn't not include it. It's just not there. This is the oh crap moment. Because we all know that private networks are private, right? My frame relay networks were private a decade ago. All of my VLANs are private from each other. All of my MPLS labels are private from each other, right? Absolutely always guaranteed forever. No one ever does a sloppy configuration on a router that permits neighbors to communicate directly with each other. without going through any kind of a choke point? That doesn't happen, right? Hands up, anyone who's never seen a router misconfiguration. There's the crickets. Exactly. So this is the oh crap moment. You've got other customers attaching to the market data source. Are they able to also attach to you? Maybe. Probably. What about other customers of the exchange? Are you sharing a border router or border switch with another customer? Anyone ever done a CPU exhaustion attack on a router or a switch? No one's done a CPU exhaustion attack on a router or switch? Okay, we've got 3 hands up. This is obviously not the pen testing talks. There are no firewalls. I mean, I wish I was joking about it, but I'm not. Firewalls, well, they add latency. In some cases, a lot of latency, right? Because large organizations are going to want to pick one firewall. This is the firewall we're going to use. And usually it smells like UTM. And the easiest way to configure these things is to turn everything on, right? Because then you know you're safe. Checkbox compliance works. Remember, latency costs money, measurable amount of money. The risk is smaller than the cost, which is way smaller than the profit. So, we're going to skip the firewalls for now. We're going to skip ACLs too. I'm dragging you all back to 1997 with a purpose. This is deeply embedded in things like the SANS methodology for how you secure a network. We're not doing it. This is old school stuff, and we're not doing the very basics because ACLs add latency. Why? Because it usually pushes things into a store and forward mode, right? And store and forward is automatically latency compared to cut through. Most switches don't cut through. I say most because there are a couple. They're very, very recent. But again, the risk, what's going to happen? Nothing's ever happened before. Nothing bad has ever happened, so why is it going to happen to us? Smaller than the cost, way smaller than the profit. And we're talking orders of magnitude smaller. The money here is just insane. There is no meaningful system hardening. It is not unusual to find trading systems that have sol.exe or paint.exe running on them. Or if you're lucky and you have a Unix-based trading system, you're going to find that, for example, all the man pages are there. Emacs and its entire internal operating system are still on there. Development tools are still on there. Putting the disk in and hitting next, finish is still the standard build methodology in most large organizations. We try to tell ourselves differently, but it just is. The other hard part that we have is we've got these systems that are theoretically stripped bare. And sometimes stripped bare doesn't mean the same thing to a trader that it would to an IT security person. Stripped bare for them is we're going to do kernel bypass on the networking because we can go faster than the kernel can. We're going to build Ethernet frames in application space and then pivot them from the application space through an FPGA out onto the wire. Glass, fiber. Because we can do it faster that way. We can already be sending the Ethernet frame before we finish calculating the trade packet, before we finish putting that message together. So we're pushing it out on the wire before we're ready to push it out on the wire. And so this custom interfacing code, which has quality all over the place, some of it is really great, some of it is terrible, because you're connecting to sometimes very normal things. I mean, Ethernet is pretty well understood. InfiniBand, not so well understood. It's not a common technology for most people. Much like anybody who's bought a fancy new Apple computer of late, PCIe on the wire is getting to be common. So you're doing bus level connectivity between systems. This is an odd place to work, an odd place to have good, solid code that's been tested for years and years and years. The BSD IP stack is the BSD IP stack because we've all been beating up on it for 20 years. And then you get the usual complaints, maintainability, configuration, details. It's really, really hard. Security's hard. Security's really hard. And these specialized systems are from companies you've never heard of. I mean, if you're in IT security, maybe you've heard of one or two of these companies, maybe. But we're not vetting their code. We're not vetting their implementations. You're not seeing this stuff on vulnerability lists. I mean, when was the last time that you saw a vulnerability posting for a Mellanox custom Ethernet interface card or InfiniBand interface card? Do they have bugs? Do the drivers get updated somewhat regularly? Yeah, absolutely. Are we paying attention to it? No, we're not even there. So we know what's missing out of our usual suite of controls, right? We go back to that architecture map and we can point to it. We know what's missing. But we can't describe that very well. We're not speaking the language of business. We're not saying these controls don't exist because they exist. These controls exist because they protect us from this kind of threat and this kind of threat and that other kind of threat. And we express those threat terms in plain language, English, you know, I'm explaining how computers work to my mom kind of stuff. Not that my mom doesn't understand computers, it's just sometimes it's easier to skip the details and get to the point. And, well, we all like blinky lights, shiny things, and not getting to the point, unfortunately. So we do a bad job of describing it, and we do a very bad job of enumerating the kinds of threats that we're talking about and why we would want to build protective measures against one, but maybe not the other. Because we don't take the time to say, here's the scope of the problem end to end. From orange jumps through losing your house to looking foolish, here's what the scope looks like. From here's all the potential bad actors and the kinds of things they could do. You know, spending an afternoon with a security team and a trading team in the same room with a whiteboard and coming up with ways that you can break things horribly. We don't do that. So how do we talk about threat models if we don't do threat modeling? Well, generally speaking, we don't. But let's talk about a few. I think vendors are a threat. Not because I have anything particularly against them. I install security products, blinky lights and shiny things just like the next guy does. But you're in a situation where you're trusting that the marketing slick is for real. How many people have bought a device that cost them more than $200, where the marketing slick said one thing and the device did something completely different? Yeah, don't you hate those marketing firmer? You're trusting as well that your vendors haven't hired any bad guys. And we all know how hard it is to get hired, even if you're slightly bad. You know, I mean, the ultimate threat to any organization is that they accidentally hire me as, you know, a receptionist. They're in deep trouble. And I can do dumb blonde. I'm not going to show off. Maybe vendors are a threat. You know, I've been accused before of being, how shall I put it, in polite company, a bit of an alarmist asshole. And I'm putting a maybe here. I think vendors are really trying. I really do. But the ways that these things can happen are so insidious, they're so small, that I don't know that they would necessarily be detected, right? How many vendors put, I don't know, Easter eggs in their code that management knows about? More than one or two? Lots. Lots and lots and lots, right? So maybe it's possible that because someone has an axe to grind, and let's admit it, who loves banks right now? Who thinks banks are awesome? Yeah, like 3 people. Do you own a bank at the back there? Yeah, okay, somebody owns a bank in the room. You know, it would be reasonable for one of these very custom, very small development organizations who are building this crazy custom stuff might have a bone to pick with one of their customers. And when you think about things like precision time protocol, where you need to know, you know, the nanosecond level timestamp of when something occurred. That's what precision time protocol helps with. If the concept of a microsecond is altered slightly for one organization but not others, they're going to start losing trades. They start losing money, looking foolish, become a regulatory problem. Hey, your timestamps are always off. Always. Regulator comes knocking at the door. Can you explain why your timestamps are always wrong? Probably not. I was going to play the developers video, but we've all seen it enough. I think developers are a threat. I really do. I firmly believe that the kinds of developers that we're talking about here in this space are not traditional developers. They tend to be finance world people. They tend to be people that have more of a trading and money background than they have a comp sci IT kind of background. They usually don't have SDLC to speak of. Some of those things that we depend on, and we don't even really talk about them because they're usually not in sort of the hug me space of information security, but stuff like ITIL change management. You know, we assume that changes will be properly authorized prior to being put, and tested before being put into production. You can't assume that in this world. Hot cutting is pretty common, actually, all day, every day kind of stuff. So this live access to live production environments, you know, the kind of stuff that is going to be an audit finding. Just, there's no way to stop it. You have no segregation of duties. You have got no meaningful change control. You've got no meaningful SDLC. All of those internal controls that you're accustomed to just aren't there, right? So the developer can do anything. Turns out I'm right. Developers can be bad people. This is the unfortunate case of the Goldman Sachs guy. That's sort of how he's known. July 3rd, 2009, a warrant was issued for his arrest. He stole 32 megabytes of code. Yes, mega with an M, 32 megabytes. It's not a lot, not really. He snuck it out using HTTPS connections, uploading it. 32 miserable, tiny megabytes, which got him 8 years and 1 month in jail. 32 megabytes. How many organizations do you think exude more than 32 megabytes worth of internal material per day? All of them, right? So this is a situation where somebody got caught. You think he's the only one? You think he's the only person who's exfiltrated the algo code for an organization? Yeah, I didn't think so either. By the way, he has a Facebook fan club. It's right there. Go visit. In the finance world, they have a thing called an insider. Insider trading, da, da, da. It's a regulatory deal. I'm not talking about that kind of insider. I'm talking about our kind of insider, the employee who goes bad, the horrible mistake they made in hiring me as a receptionist. How do you deal with a trader, or even worse, an administrator, right? Because these machines still need admins. They still need people who think that the command line is where it's at. How do you deal with them when they're doing things they shouldn't? When they're utilizing the excessive level of access that we trust them with to cause bad things? So I'm going to take you down kind of a strange and wild path here, but imagine for a moment that you are a Linux system administrator working in a capital markets organization. You're responsible for adminning a suite, a gang, a few rack loads, Red Hat Enterprise Linux boxes running on blades with, I don't know, 12 cores, 128 gigs of RAM. I mean, this is kind of like Blinky Light fanboy lust country, really. And you've decided that your employer is asking too much of you. You're not getting enough holidays, you're not getting enough recognition. The person who sits one cube over from you mutters, listens to music at a reasonable volume while collating. And you have a problem with this, so you say, you know what, I'm going to make sure that my organization never wins again. And I'm going to cause an additional 10 to 15 microseconds of latency, and I'm going to add it at the rate of 1/10 of 1 microsecond every other day. I mean, this is the half-penny problem all over again, isn't it? This is, I'm going to steal from you. By virtue of making sure you don't make money, but you know, all I've got to do is hand my money to one of the other participants because I know they will make money and you won't. Or I place a bet that you won't. Or I make it so that another participant that you don't like doesn't get to make meaningful trades. Stretch it even further. So remember I was telling you we've got all this custom hardware? You know, FPGAs with an Ethernet port glommed onto the side of it. How much of the Ethernet spec do you think they implemented? Just enough? Or the whole thing? How much of the IP stack do you think they implemented? Give you a hint. They didn't implement TCP. They got part of UDP. They've got a little bit of ICMP. Where have we seen that one before? Come on, everybody study your history. Go back 7 or 8 years. Ping and Allen Bradley PLC. Normal ICMP ping. Watch it hard crash. Want to bet we've got single packet attacks against markets? One malformed packet. I mean, you sort of wave Travis Goodspeed in the general direction of the market. Watch the thing fall over from single packet attacks. It's kind of an awesome problem when you think about it. And we've given these people all the power that they need to do this because we trust them. You have to trust the person who has root, right? Well, turns out I'm right. This is a developer trader. 2010, he stole several hundred pages of code from Societe Generale. I've used this example before this happened in meetings with executives. I said, you know, the secret sauce of this organization would fit in a couple of 3-ring binders, and I could get it out of here in a briefcase this afternoon, you'd never know. It took them a while to do forensics on the printers and the temp files that he used to print several hundred pages of code to take with him to a competitor. That'll get you 3 years in jail, 2 years of supervised release, and then you're going back to where you came from. I think the market itself is a threat. It's kind of an odd technical threat. I mean, this is the thing you're trying to participate in. How can it be a threat to you? It's the whole reason why you're there, right? I think the market itself can cause odd issues with your systems. I think the market is capable of sending you malformed messages that you've got no idea how to deal with. Because remember those developers that you have, and the trader developers, and the trader administrators, and the plain old administrators that you have? Market's got them too. Any of them trying to knock you out? Maybe. Business is pretty cutthroat. I mean, we're talking about a lot of money here. Money makes people do funny things. You got transaction risk, scrutiny kind of problems. You got compromised systems kind of problems. Remember those private networks? Everybody loves private networks, don't you? All networks are private, except all networks. Well, it turns out the market can cause you problems. May 6, 2010, Dow Jones Industrial Average drops about 900 points in about 3 minutes. It's called the flash crash. It's a really great report put out by an organization called Nano. I would recommend reading it if you're even vaguely interested in a world that moves faster than human beings can comprehend it. This is an after-action report that is just brilliant. And the only way they can give the information to you in a way that's perceivable by humans is to give you graphs. And even then, you're looking at the graph going, no, still doesn't make sense. I don't have the math for this. Ed Felton did a really good summary. This is it in I scare you with my words level. The short version of it is, there are a bunch of quote requests. The quote requests go into a queue. The high rate backs the queue up. We've all seen this happen. And this causes the quotes to take a long time to be sent out. What's a long time? Not really long, but long enough. The quote lists the price, the time, and the time is when it went into the queue, and the time stamp, or sorry, the price is when it went into the queue, and the time stamp is when it left the queue. And it was in the queue for some period of indeterminate time. So there's a gap between the price and the price, right? Price on entry, price on exit are going to be different. That's, I mean, it does actually move that fast. Those prices will be different. So you've got these non-accurate prices, old prices. But because the timestamps look new, this bad data problem becomes a bigger bad data problem on every revolution, right? It just keeps getting worse. This destabilization is a problem, and it turned into a meaningful problem. You know, Procter & Gamble lost a whole bunch of their market cap as a result of this one. A whole bunch of trades were backed out. They took a mulligan on the afternoon of trading. I didn't know you could do that, but apparently you can. Was it anything more than a bug that went a little bit sideways? It's an algo bug that says, well, if the price is dropping, sell. If the price is plummeting, sell. Well, if there's a lot of supply in the market, the price is going to drop. And I just put a whole bunch more supply on the markets, the price is going to drop again. The price just keeps dropping. Fat fingers? Somebody did it on purpose? Yeah. How do you trust in a framework like this? I mean, we're talking about a framework that makes it very difficult to talk about the notion of trust, because the entire notion of the market is, I'm going to win. Screw y'all. It's win at any cost, really. How do you trust in that space? How do you say, well, of course the market data network is going to be a clean network. I can trust that only legitimate market data is going to be on the market data network, even though part of the network is outsourced to a telco and nobody's done a security review on the market sources to make sure that that's all clean. Nobody's talked to the developers, find out who's pissed off about the person in the cube won over. And how do you monitor? I mean, how do you go to a stock exchange and say, I need your audit logs. Here, fill out this supplier assessment questionnaire. They're going to respond with, okay, and they're going to pat you on your fuzzy little head. Unless you're a huge organization, they're going to pat you on your fuzzy little head and say, off you go. That's not cool, I don't think. And, well, let's face it, IT security, info security, whatever we're calling ourselves these days, we suck. We really do. We're completely awful, frankly. We're 100,000 times too slow. We come with solutions that are the approximate equivalent of encasing your car in concrete and saying, now you don't get into accidents anymore. And we're unwilling to learn that this is a different world. I mean, we are set in our ways. We like checkbox compliance because it's easy. We like the fact that we can say no. Hey, I want to try this new innovative thing that's going to make millions of dollars for the organization. No. But I think it would be really cool if we, deployed iPads in our retail environment so that people thought we were cool, get a little bit of that Apple Halo effect. No. It's not really a cool way to operate when you think about it, because, well, it's easy for us. We've externalized the pain, we've externalized the cost, we've made it easy for ourselves, and that's a big, giant fail. And at the same time, I don't think we can answer any of the hard questions yet. We'll answer them later, because we have some easy stuff to do first, some astonishingly easy stuff that we can do first. So we're not going to talk about how you secure custom everything. How do you write security wrappers for FPGAs? I don't know. Can you buy that? That runs in maybe a microsecond? Don't know. That's hard. I don't really want to work on hard stuff today. I'm tired. I was out late last night. We need to learn how to be fast enough. We need to be talking to our vendors about being faster. We need to talk to ourselves about being faster. And faster in a number of different ways. More responsive, certainly. Less process-oriented, perhaps. And we need to make the case that security efforts reduce risk and preclude these disasters from happening. Because, the disaster hasn't happened yet. And that yet sort of just hangs there, right? After the disaster happens, it's easy to get funding for this. So when the disaster happens, pay attention to this stuff. In the meantime, let's do something. And not even the really hard stuff. Let's do network security basics. Let's party like it's 1999. Bastion hosts, ACLs. Yeah. A little bit of layer 4 would be nice, even. I mean, if we can just get it down to, you may only communicate between these two IP addresses. You sort of think about that in the back of your head, you're like, well, yeah, we don't do any firewall rules. Well, let's get there. It's going to be a struggle, but let's get at least that far. Because there isn't really a next generation, not yet. It's not even that we need the next generation, we need the next generation. Because the stuff that we've got right now that we're calling next generation is largely derivative. We've been doing the same thing for a decade, and frankly, I'm getting a little disillusioned with the fact that I've been doing the same damn thing for a decade. We're not getting any better. We still install patches. We still have operating systems that ship broken. We still have equipment that is broken by design and unfixable. And we're still willing to accept the fact that verbally abusing our constituents, saying that users are stupid because they can't learn anything, is okay. And that's crap. Stop it. Juniper and Cisco are making a real start in this, both of them. You know, I told you I'd pick on Cisco at the beginning. We'll pick on both of them right now. They're making a start now, just sort of, in the last couple of months. But they both have products on the market right now where they're quoting induced latency of under a microsecond, give or take. They're measuring in nanoseconds, which is way beyond, frankly, anywhere else in the security industry, certainly amongst the human side of the security industry. Let's find a way to keep up. Everybody, please? Yeah, this is kind of where we're stuck, right? Great, so here's this huge problem. What do I do? Do anything. Anything is better than nothing. It sounds stupid. I mean, it really does. You know, I was sitting here typing out these slides and I'm thinking, you know, can I really say, go to your capital markets division that has its own black IT department that don't talk to you and find out what they do, find out what their architecture is, know that you can't understand it. I mean, they're going to hand you a network diagram and you're going to look at it and go, okay. Study, learn, figure out what the architecture is, understand, make friends and influence people, buy coffee. In the case of traders, probably buy alcohol. IT security and traders have a lot in common. Because we suck. We really do. I mean, we're on the record as saying we will choose performance over security. And this is us. This is security people saying we'll choose performance over security. Of course, the rest of the organization is choosing performance over security. Because even we look in our own mirror and say, we suck. We're not there. We can't do it. It's too hard. And we all sound like whiny 7-year-old boys. Talk to the product vendors. Challenge them. You want more than checkboxes. I mean, checkboxes are lucrative, really lucrative. Hey, we have a firewall. Done. Turned off in a box in the corner of the data center, home to 3 mice, but we have a firewall. That's crap. We know we're not doing well. I mean, people who adhere to the religion of compliance checkbox kind of security are at least ethically absent and at most, should be drummed out of our industry fast. There is money to spend. Remember, we talked about how much money there is. There is money. Let's figure out a way to spend it. Some products, vendors get it. Most have no idea because, quote unquote, we're not asking for it. So I spent yesterday wandering around the show floor and I asked as many people as I could sort of where they were in terms of induced latency. And most of them shrugged and looked at me like I had 11 heads. Because why does that part of performance matter? I mean, they can push 52 gigabits per second. They add 3 milliseconds of latency. Gigabits are, well, they're late at that point. If you are a risk, process, policy, or GRC wonk, get with the business folks, please. They understand risk. They probably understand risk better than you do, frankly, because they make risk-based decisions all day, every day. That's their job. You talk to them funny, and their tolerances are very different than yours. I mean, this is the industry that flips out at the notion of an iPod connected to a computer. That's not their world of risk. As far as they're concerned, they just need the charge so they got something to listen to on the train on the way home. And stay away from some of that blind dogmatic stuff. ISO 17799 / 27001 / whatever the hell it was before. Yeah, that's great. It's a framework. Work within and around the framework to do good stuff because you're not going to be able to change their minds. There's effectively nothing you can do to change the traders' minds because they know. They have the numbers on their side. They can prove that because they got a little bit faster earlier in the year, they're making more profit today. They have debits and credits and accountants and numbers and things that you don't even really understand how to talk about. Just because you did it that way last year doesn't mean you have to do it this way anymore, right? We've moved past that. If you're an IT compliance person, there's some folks in the business you need to meet. Because you have something to talk about. This is the abject timeliness of the Black Hat talk just a week ago. The SEC finally released their first output from the investigation into the flash crash. And what they're telling you is we need much better auditing. That's the large trader reporting rule. They're going to have better audit trails. They're going to be able to point to the individual organizations that caused the next problem. This is detective control stuff, not preventative, but it's better than nothing. They're paying attention, and there's other regulators that are paying attention as well. If you work in the trenches, do some damn research. Stop doing derivative crap. The time for that is over. There was an article a couple days ago talking about how for the last few years, things have sort of been stalled in IT security. We've been talking about the same stuff in this weirdly self-referential mirror hall of horrors. Do some original research. In 2007, Mandiant talked about this for a few minutes at Black Hat, and no one's talked about it since. So, I'm not new to this. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, but hey, at least I did some research. At least I found out what's going on. Do some original research. Find something that is terrible and horrible and document it, please. You need to understand your business partner's needs. You need to have that conversation that says, I want to help you go fast. I really do. And the only way that I can do that is to show you that taking your mom's Civic and welding a coffee can to the tailpipe and putting a Type R sticker on it before you add the nitrous system doesn't make a fast car. It makes a suicide box. If you want a fast car, go and buy a fast car. You want ceramic brakes. You want really good suspension and steering. Because if you're planning on going really fast, you need to be able to stop on a dime. That's just the way it is. So let's help our business partners get to the point where they realize that we're not the bad kind of brakes. We're the good kind of brakes that makes it possible for them to do things faster, better, and safer than the competition. Look for those solutions, and for goodness sake, build the POCs. We're trusting marketing slicks too often. We're not doing the testing. We don't have data to work from, we have anecdotes. And even a series of anecdotes is still not data. It's just crap. Build the POC. You're gonna need money for this. How much do you think InfiniBand switches cost? They're not cheap. But if you don't understand it, you can't help to make it safe. So make that business case. Say, I need to be able to work with these people. I need to have the security corner in their lab. I need to upgrade my lab, which I haven't really touched in the last couple of years because I've been too busy playing with checkboxes. Encourage the vendors. Please, please, oh God, please encourage the vendors. They say no one's asking for features, so they conduct their own cases of raging featureitis. And we need to point them back to doing the important stuff. I mean, if you're a firewall company, make me a firewall that firewalls. If you're an antivirus company, don't try to segment the market and say that malware is different from viruses. If your AV doesn't work, your AV doesn't work. Quit saying that it does. False comfort is horrible. Get the vendors to look at the truly weird stuff. And I bet you can find a security vendor that's never seen a PCIe machine-to-machine connection running in a data center. Has no idea how you begin the process of adding a layer of security to a PCIe connection. And let's be really super prepared for the continual downward pressure on those transaction times. That downward pressure is going to get more and more intense. Over the last year, we've seen the profits available in time-based arbitrage eroding fairly quickly. And there is a great leveler at the end of this game, right? The speed of light will become a problem, and it's probably an insurmountable problem for now. We're rather ingenious little monkeys, though. I think we'll find a way around that. And most of all, don't panic. Spend some time learning about this stuff. Make sure that when we all come back here next year for our lovely summer trip to the desert, that we've got some answers to doing a better job of doing security. Feedback helps me a lot. Time for questions. Bueller? Anyone? Oh, got a hand up. Okay, so the question is, how do we combat that downward pressure on transaction times? How do we come back with answers or solutions to that downward pressure? The simple answer, honestly, is to do less with more. And it's a horrible, horrible way of putting it, but it's true. Don't add security devices. Start using the security features on the devices you have. So the classic example, and both Cisco and Juniper are playing at this table. Juniper came first. Cisco's a little late to market, but stuff happens. They've got top-of-stack switches that are capable of doing meaningful layer 4 control, effectively firewalling the way we talked about it in 2002 at wire speed with the addition of only between 650 and 1100 650 and 1100 nanoseconds of induced latency. So they'll do layer 4, and you know what? That's better than nothing. Being able to say IP import. I mean, that's the firewall rules we write and use our gargantuan expensive UTM type firewalls to do. Those are still the rules we're writing. I mean, yeah, they've got extra features that we have turned on, but really, if you can do IP import, you're ahead of the game. So you say to them, look, you are going to put in a new proximity installation in a data center. You're speccing whatever last year's top of stack switch was. Okay, it's $27,000. The new one's $38,000. So I'm asking you for a net increase in spend of, a couple $1,000 bucks. It's not bad. I mean, it's not much, really. What I'm also asking is that your network folks come to grips with the fact that it isn't just a switch. It's also a router, and it's also a firewall. And we're going to implement it as a single device. So you no longer have a router that's adding a few microseconds of delay. You no longer have an old switch that isn't as fast as the new switch. And, well, you have a firewall for the first time. So we've done less, really. We've taken out functionality. It's cost us a little bit more money. But that's given us an answer to that downward pressure to say, you know what? I'm willing to come to you with a crazy, crazy creative solution because, well, frankly, that's all we've got is crazy creative solutions. And we're thinking laterally, not linearly. Let's do the crazy thing. That's a pretty good answer, I think. Works for me. Anyone else? Understand I cannot see half the audience because that light is really bright.
If we can't fix the problem, can we pursue auditing, attribution, some legal recourse?
If we can't fix the problem, can we pursue auditing, attribution, or legal recourse? That's what the SEC is asking you for. It's looking for better after-action reports. That's what that 13H-1 rule is all about. And I think that you're right. Good auditing is good. I made the point yesterday, I was talking to somebody, I said, it would be nice if we had a better understanding of who the stakeholders are in these arrangements. If we spoke intelligently about that stakeholder community and we realized the stakeholder community for a financial market is not the companies that are directly connected. It's not the companies that are traded on the market. It's not the shareholders of any of those companies. It's not the brokers. It's the poor schmuck on the street whose gas is going to go up by 5 cents a gallon because the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 500 points today, right? That's the stakeholder community. And yes, we're talking about terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of audit data that needs to be publicly available. That we can no longer hide behind this, mysticism that says, oh, it's the markets. Daddy Warbucks says we're not allowed to touch. We need to have that data available. We need to have that auditability available, and it needs to be very transparent. And if we can do that, then perhaps we're at a point where we can say, you know what, at that juncture, yes, it's big data. I mean, we're talking big data, every day big data. But you're able to look at that data and say, well, I can tell you right now that this organization is doing something that smells a little bit too much like front running. And we can take things like, the open data movement in civic government and push that through into this kind of open data mining and mapping and say, you know what, there are good ways to visualize this data that don't include putting numbers on a screen. Let's look at it in graphical form. Let's look at a picture that goes by. Let's get a feel for it, a very visceral way, because humans are very good at detecting weird. If things are wonky or off or hinky, humans are awesome at that. Let's get access to the data, please. That NANEX report is it's really good reading, and it's exactly what I'm talking about. If we had access to that data, we'd be able to make reports like that. And we don't have access to it. Not yet. Yeah. Sure. So the question was, how do a bunch of acronym organizations, FINRA and others, how do they factor into this? Because they, yeah, I mean, they should be caring about this. The fact is they're checkbox compliant in a way that is even less useful than PCI, I think. And I think the reality is that the situation is unbalanced right now. Think about how much money is available in a capital markets organization to figure out how to do the next, not quite nefarious thing, and how much money is available in a regulatory organization to have the R&D department to figure out what's happening, what's possible, what someone might be thinking of doing in the future. How much money does the government have these days? I hear Apple has more. Yeah. So is there the appropriate level of support? I mean, it's the same thing that happens in organizations where the organization chooses willfully to have a very weak internal audit department that seems to be staffed by people that don't have opposable thumbs, right? And they do that on purpose because they know that at least they meet the requirement. Well, yes, we have an internal audit department, and they do lots of internal audits. Shh, they're completely ineffective. That's where we're at. I mean, the regulatory capability in terms of law is definitely there. The regulators can come and they can kick any old time. The regulatory capability in terms of funded, staffed with the right people. I mean, if your choice is you can go and work at the SEC and make $75,000 a year as an analyst, or you can go work at Goldman Sachs and make $400,000 a year as an analyst. Not even I'm that altruistic. I'm going with the money. So, short, horrible answer. Sorry, we can't fix it. Anybody else? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so if I'm getting your question correctly, I did a bunch of research on financial trading systems. Did I come up with anything that isn't terrible? Did I come up with examples of good? Is that right? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding. Right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, sorry, the question is there anything we can do other than not frustrate people? And no, there isn't. In large part because we don't have the backing for it. We don't have the right kind of people. People who are, IT security has been stratifying and specializing really, really hard over the last few years. So we don't have good staff generalists who understand everything from the network all the way up through the application stack. That takes 3 or 4 different people who don't talk well to each other. We don't have the processes necessary to back this, not really, not meaningfully. And we are sorely lacking on the technology side. They have the weirdest, wackiest technology and software available, and we don't have anything that's even close. I mean, most of the technology that we have now, we either don't implement it correctly, or we don't utilize it correctly, or we ignore it when it's screaming at us that there's a problem. So it's back to IT security, we suck. And until we can do a good job, we can't really meaningfully help these people, but we need to do something. And, ACLs, layer 4 firewalling is good. Yeah. Sorry, you got somebody right behind you? Okay, so the question is, because game theory is true, even if we do better, it's still an arms race, right? We're going to get a little bit better, and then they're going to get a little bit worse, essentially. How do we fight that bad guy forever? I think the answer is that we choose which fronts we're willing to fight on. You know, we don't want to fight a land war in Asia, essentially. So don't pick the unwinnable fight, but let's fight the stuff that we can. Let's make it so that, you know, the administrator who's gone bad at the other organization can't cause single packet attacks that take out our trading infrastructure. Let's make it at least that we know that we're going to be safe enough. So right now we're laying across the railroad tracks saying, gee, I hope a train doesn't come. Can we at least get to the point where we're sitting up so that we can see the train? You know, a little bit better is a whole lot better in this particular space because we're so far behind. You know, the capital markets orgs, those dark IT departments that exist, they sort of pulled away and just accelerated right down the side. And in most large organizations, they're blissfully unaware of what their capital markets teams are doing. And it's time that we, as an industry, caught up. And because this is all applicable elsewhere, I mean, think of all the places where we have real-time stuff, where latency does matter. You can't inventory electricity. Once you've generated it, you better use it. We've got this problem in medicine. We've got this problem in manufacturing. You know, the faster you want to manufacture something, the better you need to have a handle on latency. Like it's everywhere, it's endemic. It wasn't that long ago when the idea of having gigabit on my laptop was insane. Well, it's the way it is, and my laptop's 2 years old. So let's get there. Let's arrive, I guess. There was another hand. Yep, blue shirt. Sure. So the question is, because we know that we're going to hit this wall sooner or later, can we not move to a different methodology for trading where we're trading on a tick? Because I mean, that's really, you know, every 100 milliseconds or every 100 microseconds or whatever, we trade on the tick. The problem there is all we've done is change the nature from it being a timing attack to being a queuing attack, right? Because if you're going to trade on the tick, there's a queue. When did you get into the queue? Because you can't solve all trades, especially multi-partite trades, like where you've got for the trade strategy to work, you've got to have 5 trades that all execute correctly. You're going to be in a position where, yes, that kind of trading strategy will go away, but there will be other trading strategies that come up that take advantage of the fact that even if you try to do all the trades simultaneously, they're all still serial. There's a buffer there. It is first in and first out, and there's nothing we can do about it, so we'll have queuing problems. Yeah, it's a simultaneity problem, and we're into the world of big math, and frankly, big math scares me. I have trouble with addition and subtraction as it is. Another question? I thought I saw a hand over that away. Nope. Nope. No more questions. Going once, going twice. Have an awesome afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming.